A year ago, I left a job that shaped who I was for 7 years. Today, my husband Josh is flipping the mic on me to ask what a year of hosting Motivation and That actually taught me. And everything else that's happened in those 365 days. Season 2 starts now. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Motivation and That. I'm Natalie, your host, and this is where we take hot mess to high potential. And this is episode 1 of season 2. I don't know how we got here, but ironically, this is, I think, the third attempt Josh and I have had at this exact episode because as technology is not always our friend, we attempted twice in person. It was a little bit of a mess, and now we are still in the same house, but I am upstairs in the podcast room, and Josh is actually downstairs in his studio. Or his studio. I said that because I see your guitar or your bass in the background. He's in his home office. So anyway, for those that don't know, Josh is my husband, and he was the very first guest on Motivation and That back on episode 1 and 2 of season 1 when we launched this 1 year ago, which is crazy to think about it being an entire year of this episode, podcast, approach, exploratory, just awesome, humbling experience. And today we're going to flip the mics. So Josh is going to interview me for the most part today, which we've of course had a couple trial runs at, but odds are I already have different answers for everything. So this will be fun. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about Josh and I as well during today's episode. So glad that you're here. So glad that you made it to season 2. And if this is your first time listening, you'll hear a little bit about where we've been and where I'm going with things into the future, I think. So Josh, tell us a little bit about you and how your life has changed in the last year, and then you can start asking all your questions.
Oh, about me, about me. No, I appreciate that. Also, yes, glad to be here. I am obviously, I mean, as already mentioned, Natalie's husband. Just the best, you know. I mean, life just changes all the time for I think both of us, but and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit, once we get a little bit in depth with the questions. But a lot of things have changed. So it's amazing. It's a year. I think off the bat already sounds like a lot, but man, does it fly by. So, um, but yeah, no. I mean, it's just working all the time, just like everyone else, just like, well, definitely nowhere near as much as you. And I think we'll dive into that a little bit here shortly, but yeah, still doing all the things I enjoy, playing music, big gamer. Obviously Natalie made me wear these headphones to show the true me, true nerd in me. So, but yeah, that's what's been going on. So, if you're okay with it, I'll dive into the first question, and it's kind of
Yeah,
a general one. So,
hit me with it.
I will do that. I will do that. So yeah, you mentioned it's been a year. Tons of stuff, since then. Tons of guests, lots of topics and whatnot. But for those who don't know the ins and outs of your podcast or personal life and whatnot, I guess just kind of similar to what you asked me, tell us what's been going on. I mean, since the journey began. So
Yeah, so actually Wednesday of this week, so July 1st marked 1 year since I left federal government. And that was a wonderful 7 years of learning and just expanding who I was and getting to understand what I did and didn't want to do as I moved forward in the future. And thankfully, there was a little bit of a push out the door from a standpoint of being able to take a couple of months, still get paid by the government with the project or the program that they offered, and start to figure out where I was going to go next. So the podcast was the very first thing that I did, which was fun because it was a chance to just get out of the normal day-to-day healthcare executive feel of things. And I couldn't get away from it for good. That's definitely where I'm still focused. But to be able to take some time to heal and explore what a podcast could look like with what was going on. So past year has been 53 43, I think, total episodes, because there's been a couple bonus ones in there. 44 different guests, a couple that have returned, lots of different topics. I didn't know where the podcast was going to really go. It started off as a very personal journey, I think, even when you and I talked about like what the year ahead might look like. And then a lot of stuff about family, a lot of kind of interpersonal conversations, even some solo things. And then it just took off on its own. People wanted to talk about, I think, kind of uncomfortable topics, but in a safe space. And that's what really launched all of the different engagements that happened from there. I think, ironically, it led to some really good professional connections too. So being able to do work in the startup space, working in the behavioral health space, doing fractional professional compliance officer duties. And now I'm really kind of excited for what comes ahead, which is, I think, really my own path in so many ways. So the podcast was a really fun trial run to see how I handled failure in some aspects, or what I probably deemed as failure. I have great listeners on here, and you know that because you listen and you talk to people about it. But it's not viral. It's not a top 10 in any way, but it means something to the people who listen, and that, I think, is the reinforcement I needed, that when I go from here, I'm not going back into a federal government 400,000 employee kind of impact job, but it doesn't mean that I can't have really high impact in what I choose to do next, professionally or personally. So, a little roundabout way of, it's been a little bit of everything, but did I turn 41 this year? Yeah, 41. It's a good chance to have that midlife crisis and really question what happens next and challenge myself in ways that are really difficult, but ultimately, I think, really enlightening.
No, I think that's great, and it's funny you had mentioned, once you decided to transition from the previous role into everything that you're doing now, I couldn't help but think, when, and this is maybe diving a little deep, but when we're young and we jump out into the workforce and everything, and we get so caught up in what we're doing and what our supposed career is supposed to be, that by the time we start thinking about, what do I really want to do, it's, you realize, you've kind of been so tangled up into what you have been doing that you ask yourself, how am I going to find the time to figure that out? And I think this, past year and slightly prior has been that moment for you, has been that opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, even having some of the folks on that have taken the leap too, to talk about how that leap looks different for other people, there's definitely an element of planning and privilege that may come with it, but it's reinforcing and reassuring to know that this is something a lot of people are kind of battling with. Like, do I take it? How does healthcare get paid for? How do I pay the bills if there's a break in things? Like, can I market myself enough? And it's a nice community to have at least started to build or become a part of. But it takes a little time to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's scary, right? I mean, that's why you don't see more people just taking a leap, and I mean, it's risk, right? So yeah, I think the biggest fear is, and we've discussed this from time to time, is, you know what if it fails, what if it doesn't work out, and I think at some point we just have to accept, that all that is unknown, because I don't think that it's the fear of it failing, or not working out, or not becoming viral, as you said. I think it's just the fact that that outcome is completely unknown. um, and I think that it's something that's said a lot, like on a larger scale. But if you're so so focused on what you're trying to do, or so focused on the future, like you're going to forget the present, type of thing. It's that whole fear of the unknown, or it possibly not working out, is hindering you from contributing to the success of that outcome.
Yep.
But Anyway, that moves on. That moves me to my next question. So,
Okay.
um, so since you started, would you say at all, has your vision changed since the first episode, since the beginning? You've had a lot of, you've had a lot of guests, you've seen a lot of different perspectives. You've probably seen some things that, or heard some things that have surprised you or made you think a little different. But yes, has your vision changed, do you think, since the beginning?
Oh, 100%. And not that I ever thought that this was going to be a true kind of solo driven podcast, but before I had built up a roster of guests to invite or, gotten people excited to join, I did some solo episodes that were very focused on my past and my healing journey. And I thought I had probably enough content to do that a lot more. But what I found is that it became much more powerful to listen to other people's journeys and to understand how they were similar or, what I could take from them as I went along. And so it became more of a focus on listening than it became on, I think, getting stuff out of my system. So, sure, I have a couple episodes where I 100% dumped right into the podcast mic without a doubt. But I think what those did is they allowed reassurance for people to understand that there wasn't going to be judgment in this conversation at all. Like, we have been through some crap in life, and if we don't talk about it, if we don't shine a little bit of light onto things, then we never find ways to bring awareness to any of that. And so it's not that every conversation is heavy or complex or controversial. There certainly are ones that are not that we have here, but they're real and they're authentic. And that, I think, is what is turned into what hot mess to high potential actually means, which is kind of this, I feel a very kind of rolled up, intricate way about something, whether it's mental health or it's my career or it's the changing technology world. And I want to talk about it. I want to share what I know about it. I want to challenge people to think about it differently. And it doesn't mean that we solve it or that we feel healed or completely fixed when it's all said and done, but we have directionality and we know how to discuss that topic maybe a little bit more proactively and in a more communal way. And I think that's the really important piece. So what I found, ironically, is the first set of like cold outreach I got from people that wanted to join the podcast, and I would write back, and you could tell AI may have had a little bit of, their pitch or things. And some would send like a list of, here's the questions I like to be asked on a podcast. And I would write back and say, hi, JK, I don't do that. I looked you up. I read this article. I saw this thing. I want to talk about this. I understand it might be uncomfortable. Are you willing? And some of the best conversations with people I didn't know have come out of those that are willing to go, I'll go a step further. Like, I will. Like, you can ask a little tough conversation around that. And I think they've been great for that guest and for me and for the listeners. So that's the shift, is that it is taking something that feels so singular in nature, maybe unique to you, unique to a place, and understanding how big that ripple actually looks if we push a little bit to talk about it, whether it be a business that exists here in our town that also exists everywhere if you look for it, or a topic that you think no one understands, but if I maybe get into it a little bit, it'll get conversation moving. So that's the hot mess to high potential journey that I think this year is showed, and exactly where year two is taking it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I always thought it was interesting when, people would send their questions that they want to be asked, and it's it's kind of a weird like spiral of a thought process because if someone's sending this list or template of questions, I think it's very apparent that they've been on or presented themselves on other podcasts before, other media sources, and it kind of makes you ask, like, are you just giving these questions to everyone, every podcast you do, every, like, and in that sense, like, what's the point of the podcast? Like, at that point, then it's just like a sales pitch of of what you want your optics to be. So, um, but I guess, and this one is not on my list, but uh, you mentioned being adverse to that. You don't want to do ones with proctored template style questions, and what would be, if you're digging down a little bit deeper, what would be your intent with that, or your purpose?
So I think as a host, I am someone who likes to find out the unique things about people. So I do that research. I do scan, searches, and I throw someone's name in Chat GPT and I see what it pulls up, or, and go to their socials and take a look. And sometimes it actually doesn't show me anything more. Sometimes it does. And it's maybe one thing that they put up and I go, oh my gosh, like that really resonated. Or I'll see post on Threads or Twitter that they have put up, and that's what I want to dive into. And I think it's a little bit of, let me challenge you. Like, you are confident enough to reach out and say, this is what you want to talk about, but there's probably more to it. And I've been on the prep side of, in corporate world, they call them murder boards, where you're getting ready to head into a press conference or a testimony. And so they pepper you with every possible question, or at least they think they do. But what they miss is the one thing that kind of stands out that maybe you didn't latch on to initially. And I think those are sometimes the most interesting conversations to really get into. There's one coming up I think a month or two on season 2 that was that exact way. I reached out and I said, I understand you have a book. I had reached out to them, but they had a list of questions that they kind of used as their promotional thing. And I said, I'd love to talk about this, but can we talk about more than that? And the guy was super open to it. He's like, 100%, like, we don't have to talk about what's on my list. And it was a really emotional episode to record. And he even said at the end, he goes, I haven't got emotional about this in a while. And I take that as a great trait of an interviewer or a host to pull that out of someone, because listeners can hear it. You can hear in a voice when someone kind of chokes up a little bit, or, and not that I want to make people cry all the time, but also when they get like excited about something. And I think you have to get out of a scripted universe in order to have that emotional connection with each other as the people recording, and also to resonate with people who are listening, maybe without video, because that's what they're tuning in to kind of grasp.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting, the ones that are completely open to going outside of their script. I'm sure it's quite a feeling of relief, and excitement, right? So I think right then and there you kind of know that it's going to be a pretty good, a solid guest, a good experience, in other words. So you get to explore outside of what they have. But um, on that topic, of individuals, being comfortable, or being uh, resilient to the effects social media and anything might have on them, based on questions that they're asked and answers that they might have. Um, so your podcast does explore, a lot of mental health, a lot of personal growth, and resilience. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask, and this is a little bit more of a personal question, more so for whoever's listening. I feel like I know a good bit of this, but what experiences, kind of shaped those aspects in your life, and what made you kind of want to talk about growth and resilience and mental health with others?
There is one thing that I think the last year caught me by surprise with, which is I thought I knew what was next on my healing journey. And you know this better than anyone, is that I got thrown for a loop after a couple interviews, where they just rocked me, or things like came up and surfaced that I hadn't expected. And my therapist, bless her heart, I had been on this maintenance journey for a couple years with her, like once a month, maybe, doing check-ins. And I have had multiple instances in the last year where I've been like, I need a weekly for a few weeks. Like, I am like, there is stuff that I thought I had managed that is now shifting to the surface a little bit, specifically the grief episodes that we've done, the intimate partner violence ones that have been on here. They just, I think, have challenged me about where, one, how I don't want to say how good I've done with things, but did I see only one perspective of what I thought was like the route ahead for what healing looked like? Did I really recognize all the grief I'd been experiencing in my life, and starting to talk about the miscarriage that I had at 18, is something I've not discussed a lot, but doing it here with people that were non-judgmental in those conversations, and honestly just so gracious in that they were the first person that was kind of openly shared with, Jessica and Liz specifically, was a safe place for me too. So it's not that I saw this necessarily as therapy, but the more I got into it, the more I realized how complex that trauma journey has been for me. So between parental trauma, intimate partner violence and trauma, to losing people in my life to suicide, to my dad's death and my mom's mental health conditions, like there are so many layered pieces, and getting to talk to people who have been in their own journeys or their own relationships, with similar situations, I think just one, makes you feel a little less alone. Also, two, challenges you to say, hey, did I just kind of give myself the checkbox that I did a good job, but I still have a lot of things that maybe I didn't look at. So I think that it's another one of those humbling moments where I've had to say, okay, I need to do lighter episodes for a couple weeks. Take a deep breath in between things. But the topics are so important to me that it's not that I ever want to shift away from them, because, and this will be in season 2, some of them have been, I think, really cathartic for the folks that this is the first time they've shared their story openly or talked about it. And that also being really important for me, to be able to offer that space to them. So I've been lucky enough to have that space kind of created here and people willing to be a part of it. And I want to make sure it remains for others, because if they listen and they go talk to a friend about one thing that they were encouraged to, and that helps them that day, then that means I've done something good.
No, I think that's it's exciting to see how your podcasts evolve, how your episodes, I guess I should say, evolve from not just over time, but how a single episode from the very start of your conversation evolves, say 35 minutes later into the conversation, and before you know it, you're kind of touching on that hot mess aspect, and you're really really diving into a really high level of vulnerability, not just for you but for your guests. Again, not another question on my list, but you gave me some good ideas there, so we're gonna put you on the spot. But how would you, I guess, how do you approach, how do you well, maybe it's not comfortable, but I'm going to word it this way anyway. So, how do you comfortably approach each episode, um, with the potential from your point of view, you know, knowing that there might be a level of extreme vulnerability there, and how would you encourage your guests to do that? Like, say that they may be hesitant or scared to jump on a podcast because there's something really deep or really affecting that they want to talk about. So how would you encourage them, that it's okay? Come on, let's talk about it. Let's open up. It's a safe space.
Yeah, I'll never push anyone if they're not ready to yet. But what I thankfully now with 50 some episodes, there's probably one that's similar in the type of maybe person they are, the topic, that I can say, listen to this, and like just, get a feel for how things flow. I also will never, if someone is upset in the middle of something or they feel like, hey, I'm not ready yet, then you hold and we end the recording and we're done. Like, it's not the end of the world. And I think this is actually slightly controversial in the podcasting industry, especially in guest ones. I'll always offer a prep call. I want people to just get a feel for how I approach stuff. And in the instance of, I think it's even next week, Jeremy Carter, or the week after, who's coming on to talk about his suicide attempt experience. We chatted for, a solid 20 minutes just in a prep call. And I shared with him, I said, look, this is why this is important. And, I really just understand how hard this can be to share some of these things openly. And I think it created a non-judgmental space that, hopefully he trusted. And I think people will see that when we talk. But during the episode itself, I think it's important that I don't like try to buckle down and just be a non-emotional thing interviewing people. I get just as reactive and excited and emotional. And I've cried on episodes 100, and I don't even know why sometimes. I'm like, I don't know why I'm emotional about this. Like it's an empath moment. You can kind of feel it from people. And I think it just shows that this is not meant to be perfect. I rarely edit significantly in episodes unless someone really wants to remove something or there's been a disruption. The conversation is the beauty of the whole thing, and the feelings that are evoked in that moment are the beauty of what's happening. And there are ones that go somewhere I never even expected, or like the intimate partner one. I keep going back to it because I felt challenged. I literally sat there and was like, wow, this is not how I have handled these friendships in the past. Like, I have been the person that's like, I'm not dealing with this anymore, get on out of here. And it was a moment of going, did I do the right thing? But in working through that with Sarah on the episodes, it was this, don't beat yourself up. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Now you do, which is the whole point of this conversation. If we don't talk about it, you don't know. And then you can't change any effort in your life going forward. So I think just approaching things without expectations of how you think it'll be, and simply trusting and making sure your relationship with that interaction feels safe, most first and foremost. And I always send a list of 6 to 7 questions out and a little bit of topic info to the guests ahead of time, so it's not scripted, but I want them to know the general premise of the things I want to hit on so that they can veto anything, or they can say, you missed this, can you add it in? But the conversation itself is very organic in how it flows, and I think that helps too. I don't make them watch a clock. I don't time them on anything. Like, I handle all of that in the back end. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think even from the third person perspective, for me. I mean, just watching, your episodes and seeing how comfortable the guests are on there. I'm sure, or I bet that sending them those little bit of lists and having a sufficient amount of correspondence before jumping into the podcast is really it's really comforting. I'm sure, showing that level of transparency and versatility. Like, it doesn't seem like any podcast you have has to be locked in stone into some specific structure with specific questions. So um, I know I'm comfortable coming on here. So I
I
mean,
hope so.
and it's not just because I'm your husband and I live here. Um, yeah, but so you mentioned mental health a few times there. And I'm just curious, what sort of mental health related topics do you think kind of keep popping up or keep trending in your conversations throughout the episodes?
Yeah, the big one I think is grief and shame and guilt, and the intertwinement of all of that, and grief not being always just a loss of a person, but loss of relationships, loss of career, loss of kind of what you thought your future was going to look like. The shame that can kind of come with your history, your background, your trauma that prevents you from changing and shifting. Guilt right along with that in a lot of ways. And we see this even in the episodes that are about imposter syndrome, where a lot of people are tying maybe their insecurities back to experiences that they've had or things that they've heard over time. I think that there are threads that kind of run through everything, whether it feels like a discussion about innovation and change that we're having from like a professional nature, it still is this element of how has society influenced you, or what are the expectations you have of yourself or others have of you. And I think that there's always an element of trying to remove the bias and the stigma from the conversation, or acknowledging when we have it. I can't tell you how many of the episodes with coaches I've gone into where the first thing I say is, I don't understand why people pay coaches. Like, for a long time, I didn't. And then I'm like, well, it makes sense in sports, but is your brain really like a muscle that you need a coach for? Like, it seems very different from that environment standard. But that's the whole point of challenging myself, to understand not everyone's like me. Like, maybe I don't need a coach in one thing, but maybe I do when it comes to some other stuff. I just don't understand what's out there, or I don't understand what the need arises. So I think that it's also, again, a way of, when you're in the right space, saying, hey, the way you have always been is also maybe not the right way. We say that about organizations all the time, like, just because you've always done it this way. And it's like, okay, as a human, just because you've always done it this way. And that being, I think, a really strong element of everything is listening to the stories, doing it without judgment, doing it without an element of, oh, I feel so like icky because I went through the same thing, or maybe I didn't heal the same way. And just listening to listen, and listening with curiosity and exploration as the number one goal, which is really hard to do sometimes. But that being where I hope some of these like harder topic areas have challenged people to anchor themselves a little bit more.
No, I think that's, and you mentioned, the coaches and whatnot. And it's funny because I was thinking about some of the things I, it seems a little, I don't know, it kind of takes like the art out of it. It just, it's like, I'm trying to see like the perspective, or put yourself in the shoes of someone who thinks that they need a coach, or that they should get a coach. And at the end of the day, I mean, coach or not, like, you know the questions you want to ask. You know what you want to talk about. You know what you want to hear. So what do you need a coach for? It just makes me think of, I'm trying to think, like, so video games and music, two of my biggest things, right? So if I'm trying something, and I'm going to make this in the most basic and general terms, with because nobody's going to know what I'm talking about. But anytime I try something new, like a new character or something on a video game, my very first reaction is, I'm gonna go look at guides. I'm gonna find videos and blah 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 blah. Everything that should show me how I should be playing something, when ultimately every single time at the end of it, I'm just gonna do it how I want to do, because the whole point of it is to enjoy it, to have fun, to get fulfillment out of it. And very similar with music. Like, you have this music theory, you have like all these things that some people see them as like locking you in to like such a rigid thing, or some, like you said, like a coach, like telling you how you should do something. At the end of the day, it's going to be most enjoyable for you, your guest, and your audience, if you're just doing it how you want to do it. You're asking the questions you want to ask, and people are talking about the things they want to be heard. They want to get off their chest, in other words.
So what I
Um,
will say though is the stigma or the bias that I've been able to unlearn from the coaches conversation is that you need them when you can't see the forest for the trees anymore, right? So I take it back to sports. I'm swinging the bat. It feels great. I'm never hitting the ball. And I think I can figure it out. I'm going to watch the videos. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to modify. And the coach comes up and they go, it's because you have the wrong shoes on. because they can see the whole picture, or they can see what you can't see because you're so kind of personalized, biased from looking inside out. And I think that in a career world or in a business world, we get so locked into how we feel comfortable doing things that it does sometimes take someone that ironically we've paid to literally tell us, hey, you are neglecting to see this whole component over here. And I think of like, if when you were talking about music, and I think to you, like you loved the bass, you played the bass all the time and you didn't need a coach. But what if a manager had come into the band and said, Josh, you're really good, have you ever thought about playing drums? Like, you figured that out on your own, but a lot of people may not have, and they would need someone to tell them, like, you've got skill that can actually take you to another place. Like, try it out, give it a go. And so that, I think, being the difference of coaching has been weaponized into this, I tell you what to do and you do it, and if you fail, it's on you, versus what I think people think of as mentorship, which is indeed actually more coaching of, let me make these recommendations, help you put a plan into place, encourage you when you need it, and ensure that that outcome that you're kind of looking for in the end. So all that to say, there are bad coaches out there when it comes to all of this stuff. There are bad teachers, there are bad influencers, all of that. But I think if you find the right thing and your only gut reaction is, I don't want to pay you, that might be the challenge to think of for yourself. And I only say that because in this business kind of engagement I've been in over this last year, I finally broke down this just a couple weeks ago. And I said, I'm going to pay a brand person to rebrand my business. And it has been the most emotional, beautiful thing that I've ever kind of started going through. And I'm like, oh, it does take someone that knows this better than me in the YouTube videos and the AI to actually see what I couldn't even see about myself in that instance. So, not a coach, but an expert in their area. And I think bringing on those weird experts in some ways, and I say weird as a term of endearment, things I've never thought about into this podcast space to talk about what does that actually mean, has been beautifully eye-opening, because I'm like, there's a lot out there. I had never realized that there was so much more beyond my little tiny like whole ecosystem of healthcare. Like, whew, it's so much bigger than that.
No, there are definitely some very specific, very niche fields out there that you didn't know, there were experts in. But there are, and no, I agree. I think just getting that fresh set of eyes, like you said, someone's just telling you you're wearing the wrong shoes, you know, definitely changes your whole perspective. I just had an experience like that the other day, playing music. And it's funny, you get so, I don't want to say complacent, but it's kind of tunnel vision where you eventually narrow yourself into something and you're like, I'm the expert now type of thing, and then when someone else throws a different perspective at you, that's another like really uncomfortable moment or vulnerable moment, because it's a process for you. I know for me, where you have to make a decision in your mind. You have to say, do I push this idea or this suggestion away, or do I accept it and learn from it? And maybe there's something I can take from this and improve and use as growth. But anyway, I want to get into a couple more fun questions, a little bit more personal life related questions. So at the beginning of the podcast, we both had a lot of things going on, such as you had already mentioned leaving your previous job. We bought a new house, we got married, all your work with the small town cat rescue, and last but not least, my stalker. I'm sure there'll be a lot more talks and discussion around that upcoming, but how have things changed or progressed for you in that aspect?
I think that I've had ability to just, I don't want to say enjoy things around us a lot more, because I'm not just trapped to a desk 10 hours a day and back-to-back phone calls constantly, and being able to relearn how to engage with a lot of things. So I've learned my limits. far more than I think before. When you are constantly, I don't want to say tethered to your job, and it's one singular thing that takes all of your energy. And I was on the road a lot. Like, I didn't really know what my limits were in the cat rescue world. I didn't know, when was the time to just kind of put my foot down on some stuff or not. And now I can be a little bit more sensitive to that, and I think that's been good. I think that, you and I have been able to really navigate a lot of tough situations just overall. I mean, we've had a house, issue with water coming into, our family room, and our house has been torn up for a couple months. You mentioned the stalker, that we definitely, you're on the hook for an episode on that, just because it's a beautiful tangent from the intimate partner violence, where we started talking about like the impact of men, on men that are targeted by women, which isn't discussed as nearly as much. That I think was hard because there's nothing I could do. We had done everything we possibly could in that situation, and to just watch that strain continue to happen to you, and then, across the board, to us and our friendships and our relationships, because people don't like talking about that stuff. They're just like, get over it. And oh god, I wish we could have that easily, in a lot of ways. But I think that also led to being so ready to leave the job. Was I had a home, I had a partner, I had like just a village around me that was so wonderful. And that's why, I do acknowledge the privilege in some of that. I had basically a 3-month severance equivalent when I left. And to be able to do that, and to take a fresh set of eyes on now what burnout looks like. And I have, in the last year, I've still burnt out twice. Like, I've had little mini rounds where I went to bed at 8 o'clock on Thursday and got out of bed Sunday. But then it's an easy chance to look back and go, what happened? Like, why did that occur? And to, I think, reinforce to myself what I don't want to do going forward, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I've been back like in a regular-ish part-time temp thing. It's not the future. I love being reconnected with people in that aspect, but I'm like, no, I never want to run a hospital. That is not my end goal ever in life at this point, even though I know I could. I want to change lives in a very different way. And having you supportive during that, when you have no idea what it looks like sometimes, and I'm speaking a different language, and it's all over the place, I think has been really great. And my friendships, I think, have also really benefited from this whole journey over the last year. Moving away from Pittsburgh, even though I'm only an hour and a half away now, like, removed me from some of my friends. But I also had no time in life for that last year that I was working at the VA, because I was constantly gone. When I was home, I wanted to be with you. When I was on the road every other week, I was on the road. And so now there's like space to at least recognize what adult friendships kind of look like and how they interact. And I think that has been, really beautiful too. And it's not all been roses by any means. There have definitely been some really hard moments. But to your point, when you mentioned risk earlier, out of all of this, all that stuff, even though it sounds tumultuous, created an environment for me to be able to be willing to take more risk. And I think that is also really unique and important to recognize.
Yeah, and I think it's much easier to take those risks and accept them, I guess, when you realize like everything is a risk. Literally everything, because think about how much like people mention looking in hindsight and whatnot. You kind of touched on in a way, you kind of touched on knowing what you want to do by first knowing what you did not want to do. And the only way to find out what you don't want to do and learn what actually gives you that level of fulfillment, I think, is to take those risks. Because I think we get so caught up in what we've routine, habit. If you're in a job or you're in a career in a field for 5 I mean, for me, sometimes the max 5, sometimes 10, 15 years, whatever it may be. It's hard to see anything outside of that. And I don't think those sort of environments, especially in the workforce, I don't think you're going to get a lot of individuals, and this is kind of coupling that like coaching perspective or that fresh set of eyes. I don't think you're going to get a lot of individuals that will come in or come up to you and suggest or even talk about doing something else because they're in the same boat. They're in the same boat, the same routine, the same habit. Like, you get in a discussion, it's about work. It's not about, well, what else is there? Like, we're all on this island with a giant wall around it. You can't see what's elsewhere. So, um, but you mentioned, so you first lived near Pittsburgh in a much more densely populated area. Your friends were all around and whatnot. But I did kind of want to touch on that a little bit. So you moved to a very small town, Indiana, PA. Well, compared to where you were. There's a lot smaller towns just outside of us, but in that process, you moved here. You moved to Indiana, small town. I think max there's like, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 12,000 people. When school's in, it doubles, something like that. So you've become very heavily involved in all things pertaining to the community, and even established your role and your involvement in that. I mean, how has that been for you?
It's been an interesting journey. I mean, first and foremost was the involvement in Small Town Cat Rescue, who Erica, I've already told her I was going to give her a tattle on this episode that she has to come on and talk about what really animal rescue looks like in rural settings, because it's insane, and it is trying, and it is tense, and they rely on donations and volunteers, and it's wild. But through that, because there's so many people involved in that made other connections with some other folks in the area, which then I think, especially in the last few months, really started to build. And one of the themes on the pod this second half of the year was won't you be my neighbor kind of feel, tapping into Mr. Rogers, because I got my headshots done by a local photographer who mentioned you should have TJ from the Commonplace Coffee Shop on, who you also knew, so you introduced me through that. Then because I had TJ on, that gave me some credibility to ask some other people. And then it just becomes this like role of individuals that know each other. And I've started thinking about the businesses I go to, and I'm like, all right, Gabby from Bella, I'm going to have her on to talk about what it's like to own a local kind of focused salon in an area. And those things all exist in other communities. So it was a challenge for me. I hate to say it, I liked being a very small pebble in a large pond in Pittsburgh, because even in healthcare and people knew each other, you could go out and not see everyone you knew on a regular basis. Here is not the same case. We go in the grocery store, we know 5 people within the first 3 aisles we walk down. And so I had to get comfortable with letting people in my community know who I was, which is actually really challenging for me, because I like to have my professional self. I like to have my personal world that, only my close friends and maybe a neighbor or two know. And thankfully, I think I've been challenged to let that down a little bit. I found spots that aren't the right fit for me. I talked with Gary about this on the podcast that we do on the side, where I went into like a professional networking setting and I went, oh my God, I hate every moment of this. And it wasn't a reflection on them. It just wasn't the right fit for me. But then being able to craft kind of a separate engaged group of folks that I can reach out to and say, hey, what are you doing, and getting really excited about, oh my God, I might have a friend in the neighborhood now. But I don't know what, again, that's all kind of the beauty of what the future looks like, of what does a new friendship at 41 look like with someone when you're both tired by 8 p.m. at night because they've got kids, or you've had a lot of stuff going on in your day. And I think it's also just a wonderfully unique community here. It is, not to be political, but a blue dot in a red county. It has a university, it has a healthcare system, but it's still such a small town feel. We go to the local butcher, we go to the local farm stand, to buy our food and things like that. So it's a really nice blend. And I think that if it ever, I was admittedly surprised that I had any desire to move out here when we met. But now that I have, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. I kind of like it. And it's really grown on me. And people reflect that have been in the same position. They're like, yeah, when you're, 18, you think of it as the party place surrounded by farm fields because of the university that's here. And, you walk a mile down and there's a farm, but it really is a really nicely established small town community and the home of Jimmy Stewart. So it's a wonderful life right here in this community, and it really is. It embodies that.
No, it really is. It's funny how anytime you move something, somewhere, or you move into a new house or something, everyone always says, get to know your neighbors, get to know your neighbors, and usually uh I don't do that. Because it's kind of, for me, I'm most of the time introverted, but extroverted when I need to be, and I just want people to stay out of my business. Um, but no, like you mentioned, when you're out, you're going to the grocery store, you're doing this, you're doing that. You see three, four, five people, and in a way, it feels like, if I mean, it's a team, as a sense of community. Like I can confidently say, and I'm sure you could too, like if there's some sort of activity, involvement, or business I want to start or something like that, um, there are people in the community that I can go to that not only would be able to help you from like a knowledge perspective, like teach you this, teach you that, maybe even help support or guide you in the right direction, or even just give you words of encouragement. And it's funny, the first few years after college, I spent, I went to California, I went to Texas, I went to Washington State a little bit, Virginia, blah blah blah. But it took me years, probably 4 or 5 years, to realize that that whole sense of small community belonging, like all that support, it was just the one thing that was missing the whole time, and I wasn't going to get that anywhere. Sure, you could find it probably anywhere you go. I'm sure it would take some time to establish, but everybody's got, the community they like. Um, so I have another personal question, more of a time management one. Um, but you've done a ton of stuff since the podcast started. It's funny, when you were in your previous role, you were busy all the time. Like there was, from the start of the day, and then sometimes 9 at night, you're hopping back online, you're doing something, and I'm like, what's going on? Like it's that work should be done for the day. And it's funny now that that was one role, one thing that occupied your time. Now you have 6 or 7 different things, and yes, you are still busy, still pretty busy. And I think, it's safe to say you're someone who likes to stay busy, but I still think you have a little bit more free time, a little bit more control over your time, a little bit more management. But with that being said, all the jobs, all the roles that you've been staying busy with, how have you managed to find a balance, like in your personal life, activities, hobbies, and even your marriage?
I expect a lot less of myself from a professional standpoint, and I don't mean that in a sense of my quality of work has gone down. I mean it in a sense of we're human, and a lot of times I have just had to say, you know what, I don't feel good today, and that's not going to happen today, or I'm not going to go in for that, or can we reschedule this meeting? The podcast has been a really good opportunity for that because, I've learned, hey, everyone else has lives too, and things come up, and you have to be ready to shift. I think the beauty of some of the work I do now, a lot of it can be done at any point in time. So it's not being filled with meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. I work with people on the West Coast. I have a couple of folks that are international. So it makes sense to work at 8 p.m. at night, when there's not, you have band practice and I'm, kind of upstairs, seeing, all right, well, what am I going to do now? Or I'll edit the podcast now, or I'll do this. And so I can work in bursts. And as someone with ADHD who can very much hyper focus in an instant, and you've seen me do this, working in bursts almost sometimes becomes much more productive in a sense. So working for one of my engagements for an hour or two, taking a break, flipping to the next engagement for an hour or two, taking a break. And so it allows me to still fulfill this desire to click the box of I did some stuff without feeling like it's never ending. And I think that's really important. The work at the VA, which again, loved the mission, it just felt never ending. It was like a revolving door of I had this conversation 15 times. Why are we still having it? And I think it also makes it easier, as much as it's been hard for me to learn how to do, when you say, hey, let's go do this real quick. And I'm like, huh? Okay, like I'll be at a stopping point in 15 minutes. I can get up, we can go, run a quick errand, or we can go for a walk, or, we can make lunch or have coffee in the morning. And so it's allowed flexibility. And if there is one professional love language that I have, it is flexibility, whether it is to work remotely, to work on my own set hours. Trust me, to get the work done, I will get the work done. And if I won't, I will tell you. And I've only had one instance where I got overwhelmed and I didn't feel good and I didn't communicate right off the bat. And thank God I work with amazing people. And the contractor I was working with, she said, just text me, just let me know, just have Josh send me a message. Like, it's okay. And so reminding myself not to shut down when I do hit that point, and just to be open and honest with folks, I think goes a long way. And so people know what they're getting when they work with me, and I'm very upfront about that. And I think that is made for some really good professional relationships.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. It's nice when you get the freedom to manage your own time and you know push away the micromanagement, push away the micromanagers. But anyway, I've filled up a lot of air in the past however many minutes. Do you want to flip the script? Do you have any questions for me?
I have one for you, and it'll take us right up into probably our hour mark. But when we went back, the very first episodes were, he thought I was sane. And, and then, you got what you got in this marriage and this relationship. And you have watched, I think, a very self-exploratory journey of someone that you love over the last year. And I know that at least what I have seen, you have been incredibly patient and supportive of the entire thing. What are you hopeful of now that you have kind of seen this first year? Like, what are the things that have excited you or maybe scared you a little bit about what this looks like, especially considering how different it is from how we both were when we first met and, started this journey together?
Um, well, and hopefully I answer this question the way it was asked because that was a lot for me and my ADD. But I mean I think there was never a moment. I don't think there's ever been a moment. Watching you do what you do, supporting you, that has ever scared me. Um, I really think it's a trust first type of situation. In a way, I think that I don't know what when I see you doing something that makes you happy, gives you that level of fulfillment, and you continue to do it because of those reasons, not because oh, it may make me make money someday, or it may go viral, whatever. You're just doing it because you love it, because you enjoy it. It makes you happy. Um, I just, that motivates me. And I just do you know, what supports you, what allows you to do that more. and in any way that it can contribute to that. And what excites me is, and it kind of touches on a question that I asked a little bit earlier about growth and resilience, but even in this past year, like, I mean, yeah, there's like with the podcast specifically, there's little tech things you've had to learn. There's um, different ways to approach conversations, guests, topics. But overall, it's been really exciting to see the growth, to see you grow um, into. I don't know. Sometimes I watch podcasts and I'm like, "Who's that celebrity?" You know, like who's that? I mean, how'd I get so lucky? But no, I think it's just trust, love, support, and not being afraid of not being afraid of the outcome. The risk is always going to be there. I don't know. I've been like that a lot for a long time though, so it's kind of a little bit of an advantage for me. Um, but yeah, that's my answer to that. And I'm excited to see where it goes. You know, continued growth, the variety of guests and topics, and just seeing you continue to get that level of fulfillment and enjoyment out of it. But on that topic, um, before we close out, it's funny because I think about this like when we're watching an episode of like From or something. It's like up next on or next week on. But what's something you've been currently working on, you know, that excites you, or something upcoming you maybe want people to know about?
Yeah, so I mean, the set of episodes were actually scheduled out until October with recording. So lots of amazing conversations that'll continue to happen on motivation and that. The podcast I'm doing with Dr. Gori Bahari, Get a Grip with Dr. Gori, is also continuing to kind of build, and we're having additional guests there. But the most exciting thing, and if anyone's listening and you're in this world of like, hey, I want to be part of creating something new and established going forward, is I've been building what I call a perspective assessment in the background. I'm not going to give too much away because I'm still working on ensuring all the trademark submissions and stuff are right. But I'm looking for folks that'll be a part of maybe a testing community to see how much sense does this make for people, whether it be a professional or personal assessment of how we lead ourselves, how we lead organizations, and how we lead others. And it takes a lot of, I think, what I have seen as being the listener in the room and the person picking up on power dynamics and all of those things, and putting in a way that anyone can kind of challenge themselves to understand their current state, the current state of other people around them, and how patterns can kind of illuminate. And it doesn't mean that your pattern needs to shift. It's the whole point, and it's how it tags so nicely to motivation, and that I got thrown for a loop after a couple interviews where they just rocked me, or things like came up and surfaced that I hadn't expected. Is, are you at least aware of it, and can you understand how it translates back and forth? So your pattern is not a hot mess, neither is someone else's, but when you put them together, can you crosswalk between the two to see where the potential lies in things? So if folks are listening and you are interested, I encourage you to leave a comment on wherever you are listening to this podcast episode. In the near future, I'll have a little kind of pitch link that can go out there that you can sign up to be a part of a test group or a founder group, so to speak, on it. And this is the really awkward because I've never sold anything of myself on the podcast, but it is what this has taught me over the last year, is that when you open yourselves up to see how other people view the same exact thing that you do, it shines light on so many amazing opportunities, and also brings so much awareness to help drive our decisions better. And that is really where I hope to kind of take the future, is bringing lessons learned here back to kind of my professional world, but also recognizing how much it's helped me grow and understand and communicate with people, and making that something that everyone can have access to. So that's what I'm really excited for going forward in the future. New engagements with new clients in my risk and compliance and strategic preparedness consulting world. So that's also an opportunity, but really just to watch things evolve. And I won't say grow, to watch them evolve, because evolution is beautiful in what it can illuminate and what it can just show us over time about ourselves and those around us. You're just
I
gonna
think
let us sit there in silence at the end. Thanks.
I'm just digesting everything you said because it all sounds awesome. Um, no, I think that's great. It's great. I'm excited to see the episodes. I'm excited to see, everything you're working on. Even though I get a little bit of an insider look, I'm still very excited. I'm sure everybody else will be excited to see where it goes and what it can offer. So, um, that's all I have, and I mean, I'll see you in a few minutes. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And thanks if you've been watching for the awkwardness of me and my husband in the same house, but also virtually just talking to each other through computers. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got something from today. This is a little different of a type of episode, but I think it's really insightful to challenge me to look back on what I have learned over the last year. So thank you to my amazing husband, who I'm sure has just highlighted, as you've been listening, all the ways that makes him amazing without him even knowing it, and kind of playing along with this on the third attempt and successful attempt. Yay.
Yeah.
And I hope that you will tune in again real soon for another episode of Motivation and That, where we take hot mess to high potential and just create that safe place for exploration, curiosity, and wonder.